Muslim professor of Islamic theology concluded after research that Prophet Muhammad never existed. Munster, Germany, Mohammed Svebkalis, a Muslim convert and Germany's first professor of Islamic theology. He fasts during the Muslim holy month, doesn't like to shake hands with Muslim women and has spent years studying Islamic scriptures. Islam, he says, guides his life, so it came as something of a surprise when Professor Kalish announced the fruit of his theological research. His conclusion: the Prophet Muhammad probably never existed. Many scholars of Islam question the accuracy of ancient sources on Muhammad's life. The earliest biography, of which no copies survive, dated from roughly a century after the generally accepted year of his death, 632, and is known only by reference to it in much late texts. All the same, Professor Nagel has signed a petition in support of Professor Kalish, who has faced blistering criticism from Muslim groups and some secular German academics. We are in Europe, Professor Nagel says. Education is about thinking, not just learning by heart. He was struck, he says, by the fact that the first coins bearing Muhammad's name did not appear until the late 7th century, 6 decades after the religion did. The more I read, the historical person at the root of the whole thing became more and more improbable. He says he has doubts, too, about the Quran. God doesn't write books, Professor Kallis says. I am convinced that what I'm doing is necessary. There must be a free discussion of Islam, he said.
With me today is Murad. And I believe, Murad, you're going to talk with us about the 4 surahs that refer to Muhammad.
Yes, exactly. First of all, I would like to just have a little comment about the depictions of Muhammad, the early depictions. And you can put the pictures that I've sent you. One of them is of the first caliph, Abu al-Abbas al-Saffah. And you can see the garments he's wearing and the facial features. He looks from Central Asia. And Harun al-Rashid, the one who is standing, he doesn't look like the Hollywood Arabian Nights. No, he looks Central Asian. And what I was saying is that it's a little bit suspicious that it went on for many years that Muhammad was drawn in this manner. And later he got like a little darker, and then he got like more like Uthmanic features and that stuff. So this is just a little comment on the comments. I have read all the comments, and I want to say that I really appreciate all the comments. I've read them all. Thank you very much, and maybe we can do a little more about this. Now, coming back to the surahs which mentioned Muhammad, let me say that the name Muhammad is mentioned in the Quran literally only 4 times. And if in the English translations you find that more than these 4 times, then this is deception. He is mentioned in Surah 3, verse 144, and in Surah 33, verse 40, and in Surah 47, verse 2, and in Surah 48, verse 29, and nothing more.
It's an incredibly few number of times for someone that's supposedly so important in the Quran. Why do you think that might be?
Well, some people, the Muslims in the Arabic countries, they say, well, God was speaking to Muhammad, so he doesn't need to call him Muhammad. And this might sound logical, but it doesn't make sense. When you read the Quran in Arabic, it's not all like this way of speech. It's not all like God is speaking to Muhammad. You have a lot of verses which speak as if someone is calling God or something like that. So the pronouns, it doesn't always fit, and it doesn't make sense. So I think the few mentions of Muhammad, they don't have anything to do with the Prophet of Islam, who is Muhammad. And now we can look at the first verse in Surah 33, verse 40. it says in Arabic, محمد ما كان محمد أبا أحد من رجالكم ولكن رسول الله خاتم النبيين, which means Muhammad is not the father of any of your men, but he is Rasulullah, which is Prophet of Allah, وخاتم النبيين, which means the last prophet, the seal of the prophets. Now, if you put the hypothesis of Christoph Luxemburg and you replace Muhammad with Jesus or the Messiah or the chosen one, you will see that it makes sense. Jesus was not the father of any of the men. This is true.
Mm-hmm.
He was the prophet of God according to Islam, which is true. And he was the last Messiah. He was the seal of the prophets according to Islam, and it makes sense. And actually, there is a very prominent researcher called David S. Powers who discusses this, and this is the ayah of the Zayd incident. And let me say in Arabic that Zayd or Amr, they used to mean a random person. It doesn't mean a certain name. Maybe later they became names, but it just means a random person. So this was the first verse. It could not mean Muhammad. Maybe it did, but still it might not mean Muhammad.
One of the interesting things for me is I've read that they were keen to make sure that everyone was convinced he had no sons, whether biological or adopted. And part of the purpose of this would be to cut off any doubts about that, because they believed prophethood was something that was biologically inherited. So if anyone came forward and said, well, I'm a great grandson of Muhammad and, I'm now the new prophet, they didn't really have anything to say no to them. So they had to insert this to eliminate that possibility. What do you think of that explanation about it?
This explanation makes perfect sense, but it makes perfect sense when the Quran got Arabized and Zayd became Zayd ibn Haritha. So this scenario is perfect after the Abbasids historized the material. But if you just read it in like the original context, you don't really get an idea who is Zayd, who is this Muhammad. It's not very clear if you read it without the later traditions. So when they found that it says Khatam al-Nabiyin, which is the seal of the prophets, they had to make it like this for theological consistency. And they had to make Zayd die before Muhammad. So in order not to have a contradiction with the theology. And another interesting part is the word Khatam al-Nabiyin in Arabic. Sometimes in tradition, and I'm not sure if they translate these things in English, they say that a seal of the prophets doesn't mean that he was just the last prophet. It means he had a mole on his back, and that's a sign that he was the last prophet. So even in the traditions, they don't know if it's the seal of the prophets as a symbol and he is the last prophet, or was it a mole in his back. So this is kind of funny.
Okay, so it looks like they don't really know exactly what this concept of seal of a prophet is. Is there anything in the Arabic word for seal that might suggest other meanings, or is it the same as it is in English?
Khatim in Arabic, it could mean a ring, but of course here it doesn't make sense. So it just means seal. It doesn't mean a mole. It just means seal. This is the more logical answer.
Now, when you say ring, do you mean like a ring that you would wear on your finger? Because the kings in the past used to use the ring, like I think Pontius Pilate used a ring to press against the wax on a letter to seal the letter. Is that the sort of ring we might be talking about?
Yes, but yes, of course, the word khatam in Arabic, it just means ring. And khatam in Nabiyin, you have like Solomon and his ring, his powerful ring, and all this stuff. Maybe later conspiracy theorists say this is the Lord of the Rings and stuff.
Oh,
so
right,
I'm not sure, but the logical, easy answer is just that he was the seal of the prophecy, was the last one, and that's it.
yeah. Okay, cool. Let's look at another example of the use of Muhammad in one of the surahs. What one would you like to look at next?
Now we can look at Surah 47, and the name of the surah is Muhammad.
Very appropriate.
So let's take a look at the name of the surah, because a lot of people who argue for the historicity of Muhammad, they say, well, there is a surah called Muhammad. Well, first of all, these surahs were renamed later. If you look at the Sana'a manuscript, you never see that the surahs had names. And as a side note, this is why John of Damascus is very late, because the surahs had names. It means it was late. Now, this surah, in other traditions, it's called Surah Al-Qital, which means the surah of fighting. So sometimes it's a surah of fighting, but sometimes it's Surah of Muhammad. Today, you will not find the Quran call it the surah of fighting, but they used to argue about this before. Maybe they renamed the surah as Muhammad to historize Muhammad afterwards. And interestingly, if you look at how this surah begins and the one before it, you will find that it was a sentence and it got cut off. It got cut off like a knife, because it doesn't make any sense. But if you remove the name Muhammad, Surah Muhammad, and you just read the last part of the previous surah and the one after, it makes perfect sense. So they just cut it off without any logical coherence in the sentence.
Can I just cut in there? So,
yes.
Are you suggesting that those surahs led one into the other, and they artificially split them into two separate surahs?
Yes, exactly. Even if you read it in English, I think I didn't read it in English, but if you read it, I think it will make perfect sense. Just read the surah before it and the one after it, and you will find coherence.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting.
Now, let's see what this verse actually says, which is verse number 2. It says in Arabic, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, which means the ones who believed and did righteous things, and وَآمَنُوا بِمَا نَزَلَ عَلَى Muhammad, and they believed what has been revealed to Muhammad, وَهُوَ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ, and he is the right thing from your God. كَفَّرْ عَنْهُمْ سَيِّئَاتِهِمْ وَأَصْلَحَ بَالَهُمْ. So the word kafar, here it says the people who believed what has been revealed to Muhammad, and kafar anhum means something like removed their sins. If you say kafar in Arabic, it's something like hide. It's not kafir, does not mean unbeliever. This is later tradition when it got Arabized. Kafir means someone who hides something. And kuffar from the Aramaic and the Hebrew, it got later into English from cover and hide. So kafar in Arabic then became cover. So here it says that Muhammad, they hide their sins and made their minds right. And I believe that this is Jesus, and kafar their sins is like the how do you say that?
They had their sins forgiven, absolved.
Yes, something like this.
It was actually exactly what I was thinking as you were saying. I was thinking, this is incredible. So this could possibly be from a Christian source that was then taken and just put together.
Yes, this verse, I think it has this meaning. It says that he had covered their sins. Muhammad forgave their sins.
Oh. Doesn't look so good for Muhammad in the Quran so far. Because that's two very doubtful ones. What one would you like to look at next?
Now let's look at Surah 48, verse 29.
Yeah, okay.
This is the one which people think is the most obvious. That is the Muhammad, the Arabian prophet. But let's look at it. It says in Arabic, Muhammad Rasulullah, Muhammad is the prophet of God. and وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ أَشَدَّ عَلَى الكُّفَّارِ, and the ones who are with him are hard on the kafirs, or the unbelievers. We have to just say it like this now. رُحَمَاء بَيْنَهُمْ تَرَاهُمْ رُكَّعًا سُجَّدًا. So they have pity on the people who sajid is like when you go down on your knees and pray. And interestingly, it says مثلهم في التوراة والإنجيل. It then says that this is their example in the Torah and the Gospel. And then it says this example. Now, if we take a look at kuffar, and again we say that these are the people who hide the truth, you will find that these two examples are in the Gospel of Mark 4 and in the Gospel of Matthew 12. And interestingly, of course, as you see here, it's in the Gospel of Mark and Matthew. This is one Gospel and this is a different Gospel.
Mm-hmm.
But the two examples are merged into one example in the Dia Tessaron, which is the Syriac Gospel. And it talks about the fruits of the good people is like and the bad fruits of people, and it was referring to, I'm not sure how you say this, maybe the Sadducees, who are the Jews who Jesus called the sons of snakes or something like that.
Sadducees, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yes, so, I think Jesus called them sons of snakes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Vipers, yeah, snakes, yeah.
Yes, the snake being like the original Satan or something. So here, if we replace Muhammad with Jesus, it again makes sense. Jesus, he was hard on the Kafirs, who were the Sadducee Jews. And if you recall, Jesus, when he went to Jerusalem, he was hard. He kind of like destroyed what they were doing, and he said something like, "You were destroying the Holy of Holies," or something like this. I'm not sure if Christians know this, they can say it.
Yeah. It's when he cast them out of the temple for turning it into a den of thieves. That be the one?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Now, I want to look at another verse in the Quran, and this is in Surah Maryam, which is Surah Mary, mother of Jesus. This is Surah 19, and it says, "Ga'alani Mubarak." Now, Jesus is talking here, and he says that God made me Mubarak, which is like praised one. And again, in the same, this was verse 31. In verse 30, it says, "Qala inni," he said that I am, Jesus speaking, "Abdullah." He says, I'm the slave of Allah, slave of God. "Atani al-kitab," he gave me the book, "Waja'alani nabiyyan," and made me a prophet. This is the same thing which is in Pislam's 113. And now I will read from the King James Bible. It says, "Blessed the name of the Lord from this time forth and forevermore." The same word which is blessed, or it's Mubarak in Arabic, and Abdullah is like prophet of Allah or slave of Allah. So here, I think it leans more towards Jesus than Muhammad, the Arabian prophet.
Wow. So the Bible connection would really strengthen the argument that this is really referring to Jesus originally.
Yes, the verse says that this is their example in the Torah and in the Gospel.
Excellent. And just to clarify, the Syriac New Testament that you referred to,
Yes.
is that the one where they harmonize the different Gospels into one Gospel? Is it that one?
Exactly. It's called the Dia Tessaron, and it was circulating, of course, in the Syriac, and later I think they abolished it or something.
Wow, that's really helpful. Yeah. Fantastic connection there.
It means that when the Quran says the Gospel in the singular, I guess it's always referring to the Dia Tessaron and not the New Testament which we know today.
Yeah. Very good. Okay.
Now, if you want me to continue.
Yep. So you've got one other example of Muhammad in the Quran, I believe.
Yes, I left this one for last because it makes the case more obvious. Surah 3 verse 144. It says, ما محمد إلا رسول قد خلت من قبله الرسل. Now listen to Surah 5 verse 75. Even if you don't speak Arabic, just listen to this. وما المسيح ابن مريم إلا رسول قد خلت من قبله الرسل. It is the exact same word. And here it's Al-Masih ibn Maryam, which is Messiah, son of Mary. And here is Muhammad alone.
Wow.
I think this is like another definition. And if you notice that the Quran, it calls Jesus many names. Sometimes he says Al-Masih ibn Maryam. Sometimes he says Ibn Maryam only, which is son of Mary only. Sometimes he says Isa. And maybe sometimes he says Muhammad.
Yeah. The praise one.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So this is all I have to say in this regards.
Yeah. So if our only source for Muhammad's existence was based on the Quran, I think you've really made a strong case that it's actually really weak. I think on the balance of evidence, you would have to say that it's really about Jesus, not Muhammad.
Yes, it makes more sense about Jesus in the Quran. And if you read the Quran in Arabic, you will find many times that it plays on the names for the sake of rhymes. So I know that it does this. So it's not far-fetched that Muhammad was another synonym for Jesus.
In order to get the rhyme to work properly.
Oh, and let me tell you something. The word Muhammad in the Arabic form is very close to the word Yeshua, which is Yeshu in the Syriac form. So maybe it was Yeshua or Yesu, which is Jesus, and they just change it a little bit to be Muhammad, to be the Arabized form.
Yeah, especially if they're taking a Syriac text and then converting it to an Arabic one, that could easily happen.
Yes, that would be very easy and very close to believing.
Excellent. This is fantastic, Marood, and I'm sure our listeners will really appreciate all the hard work you've put into this in terms of drawing it all together for us.
I want to mention something for the people not to get deceived. The word Ahmad in the Quran, it doesn't necessarily have to mean Muhammad. And in the Islamic traditions, they say, well, Ahmad is just Muhammad. No, we can discuss this in a separate video, but I just want to say that Ahmad is not Muhammad.
Ah, okay. Well, that just makes us all the more interested to hear what you have to say on that at a later stage. So thank you for that.